Hi, guys. So, welcome to our first online session. Can't tell you how excited I am to go over this. Uh, I think it's going to go really well. I know it's kind of a bummer not being in person. Hopefully, everything kind of settles down. Um, but I am excited in that we get to still go over the material, which is great. We're on to Unit 4 now, which is all about money, banking, and monetary policy. And if I'm being honest, I actually tried to record it. I did my entire PowerPoint and recorded it, and it didn't work. So this is actually take two from me. Hopefully, it's better. If it's not, well, there's only going to be four more of these you have to go through. So during the PowerPoints, the four PowerPoints that we do, 4.1 through 4.4, I'm going to ask that you take notes. You're answering the questions on Edpuzzle, which you're currently going through right now. And then the third is to answer the corresponding questions in Albert afterwards. So here we go. We're ready to rock and roll wherever you're at. I'm hoping that you guys are in a safe and healthy place. I do promise I miss you guys. We've got a puppy here, which is very exciting. This is Cora. I'll try to introduce you to her right now. She's very camera shy. Cora, come on. Wow. So this is Cora. Hey, Cora, you want to say hi to my class? Hello. Hello. So we named her after kind of the coronavirus. She's a sweetheart. Here you go, Cora. So we'll try to get Cora maybe making some guest appearances in these. So please take notes. You're going to upload them, send a photo to me with it. Everything is available Google Classroom. If you have any questions, come see me during the office hours. The classroom cafes are going to be opportunities for you guys to make up some points. Are we ready? So Unit 4, we've only got 4 more PowerPoints to go. Let's get into it. So 4.1 is all about money and kind of our banking system. Just for fun, if you'd like a little bit of trivia, here are various currencies. I'd like you to try and see how many you can name out of these 10, as well as tell me what e pluribus una means. If you are into it, stop the recording, pause it, try to answer it. Otherwise, we're just going to keep moving on ahead. So if you want to do it, stop. Otherwise, here are the answers for those that are interested. Just as a kind of interesting note, all of these individuals are presidents with the exception of Hamilton, who was the first Treasury Secretary, who also was shot by Aaron Burr. We're well with that, the story, Hamilton. 4.1 is all about money. Money. We love it. We love to spend it. Maybe we don't have as much of it because we're econ teachers, but it's good to have some background on it. Once we're done with the AP test, and we'll figure out when that is on Friday, we'll have some more time to discuss personal finance so that you can have more of that money and hold on to it. So why do we use money? And again, I'll tell you primarily what to take notes on. So what would happen? We use money because we want to buy things. Well, what would happen if we don't have money? So if you can include the barter system for us and then the 2 problems with money, and I'll explain it. And if my window, me talking, is in the way of anything, you can move me around as I'm kind of doing now. So there you go. I also have the ability to point, so that's cool. So follow the bouncing ball. If we did not have money, we would have to barter. That is to say, negotiate and trade for what we have for what we want. That is an exchange. And if we didn't have money, we would have to trade for everything that we would want or have. And that's difficult. There's some problems with that. The first is the double coincidence of wants, right? If I'm trying to make a trade, I've got to find somebody that wants what I have. I also have to find somebody that has what I want. So there needs to be this kind of back and forth, this mutual desire for each other's goods and services. So that is kind of a problem. with money, we don't have to worry about that because one side is always going to want money, right? So whatever you have, Oliver's is going to want more money in exchange for the sandwich. We know that. So it kind of prevents this need for double occurrences of wants because we know that the other side is always going to want money. And then the other problem is that goods can't be split. I've got a goat. Somebody wants to trade for part of the goat that I have or to buy my goat, but they only have one chicken. Well, maybe that chicken isn't worth the entire goat. One chicken is only worth 1/5 of a goat. Well, I'm not going to kill off or divide 1/5 of my goat in order to get the one chicken. So how do we, prevent that? Money allows us, because it is easily divisible, it can be broken down to kind of help us with that. So that would be a good example of this problem with exchange, that if we didn't have money, it would be harder to divide certain products. So an example, a doctor might accept only certain goods, so you need to find what the doctor wants in order to get help. That would be the double coincidence of wants. So moving forward, if we can include what money is, just the general definition, you don't need to include anything else. But in general, money is anything that is generally accepted in exchange or in payment for goods and services, right? So you take an Uber ride, they're providing you a service, you give them, some money back and hopefully a 5-star rating if they did a good job. Money is not the same as wealth or income. We equate and use them as synonyms. It's not necessarily the same. Money is that currency in hand that you have or in your banks. Wealth is the accumulation of all of your assets, things that you own, where if we were to put them all together, oh, that is your wealth. You own a Subaru Forester. You own $20,000 worth of stock. You own a sweet Schwinn bicycle. We could sum all of those together. That would be your wealth or your worth, is a way to think of that. Your income is going to be a measure of how much you earn over a period of time. So teachers, we make a couple $100,000 in a year, right? That is my income annually. I could break that down into monthly. I make $20,000 a month as a teacher. Right? I could break that down into weeks. I make $5,000. That's my income weekly, right? So if you were to add up your income, you buy goods. If you were to add up those goods and any of the money you saved, add them together, that's going to be your wealth, right? And money helps us to exchange and buy the goods and services that will become our wealth, which we purchase with our income. So there's two types of money. The first type is commodity money, and I would write this down because AP Econ, and I'll show you a question. They do ask some of the two types of money. So the first type of money is commodity money. And what I underline there is kind of the best way to explain it. Commodity money is a commodity. It's something that it is desired. It has intrinsic value. It is worth something in and of itself. People want it because of, it has some appeal. Cigarettes in jail commonly get exchanged for certain services that may be provided. Why? Because people want cigarettes in and of themselves for their nicotine fix. Gold is an example of commodity money. It is, nice to look at. It's shiny. It can be smelted down to make other products. Gold is a commodity that is worth something, right? That people want. On the flip side of that, you've got fiat money. Fiat money is not in and of itself worth anything. Fiat money just has value and it has worth because it is believed, and we naturally all hold this belief that it is worth something. So it serves as money but doesn't have any real intrinsic value. A dollar bill is just paper and ink. There's lots of paper and inks. Teachers give you worksheets all the time. You can't go to Oliver's, hey, I'd like a sandwich. here's my math worksheet and hand that in. Well, what's the difference? It's just paper and ink. Well, no, I don't want your homework, right? It's not generally accepted. A dollar bill is believed to have value. Um, why? It's just kind of custom. This is what we hold true. It's been historically the case. Some examples: digital currency, Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin in and of itself isn't worth anything, but we assume that it's worth something. Some functions of money, and please write this down. I've seen this being asked on AP. And if I'm going too fast, pause it, go over the slides. If you have any questions, there will be a forum where you guys can ask me any questions that you might have, should you want that, or go to a classroom cafe or an office hours and we can meet and go over it together. So the three functions of money. The other reason I'm going a little fast is because I'm ticked off that I've already recorded this. But that's my fault, not yours. So I'll try to not hold you to that. A medium of exchange, right? We exchange money for goods. It allows us to prevent that first problem with money. It doesn't have us make this double coincidence of wants, because both sides are going to want money. So it is always going to be desired and exchanged. So it's a medium of exchange. The other one is that it's a unit of account, right? I talked about the goat and the chicken. Well, I can put a dollar value or hold in a unit of account that a goat is worth $50 and a chicken is only worth $10, right? So this allows me, and I can have some account that says, okay, well, if a goat is $50, a chicken is only worth 10, a goat must be more valuable. So in order to equate or to equal that goat, I need 5 chickens because the chicken's value is only $10, so forth. So it'll acts as a measurement which can, be generally understood for how much something is worth. Whereas if maybe I'm not a really good goat farmer, I don't know what a value of a goat is. So money acts as a unit of account where we can generally understand how much things are worth based on that. The other thing is it's a store of value where maybe I don't want goats or chickens right now, but I might want it in the future. Well, I know that money is going to be, hold its value, so I can hold on to it so that I can buy products in the future, right? I might not be able to hold on to a chicken 10 years from now so that I can buy a portion of a goat. Why? Because chickens die, man. You've heard that joke. Why does the chicken cross the road? Well, they die, right? So some dollars are not going to die. They might be worth less or more depending on inflation, but it is still going to relatively hold some store of value that's going to allow me in the future to buy more of that good, right? If you're unsure about that, I've got a video here. Feel free to watch Mr. Clifford explain it. He probably does a better job than I could anyway. No hard feelings. Mr. Clifford's the man. Just an example, and that was kind of interesting. In this island country of Yap, their currency was this giant stone. And you wouldn't carry this stone around, obviously, to go to the grocery store. But some bank on this island had a ledger and they kept track of how many stones each person owned. And not just that, fractions of stones. And so, like, if I wanted to buy 10 chickens, I would say, well, I'll exchange 1/10 of a yap that I own. Okay, well, that 1/10 of a yap now belongs to this person. And I got the goats or chickens, whatever I said. Why? Because money, it was finite. And it was understood that it's similar to Bitcoin, right? You're just exchanging money from one account to the other. One of these stones fell into the ocean. And it was still generally understood that some person had that ownership of that stone, which is kind of neat. Why? Because somebody had a ledger. People wanted these stones. This was their form of currency. Is this any more crazy than paper currency. Maybe it's not as portable, it can't be exchanged as well, but it's generally the same concept. It holds value because we believe it is valuable. We just paper as opposed to stone. All right. On your ed puzzle that you're doing, pause it. Please answer this question. Which of the following is not a function of fiat money? Well, you got to combine the last couple slides. What are the three functions of money? Well, the acronym for that is AVE, A-V-E. It's a unit of account, it's a store of value, and it's a medium of exchange, right? The other one, fiat money, well, is fiat money intrinsically valuable? Is it a good that we want in and of itself? No, it's not, right? So which is not a function? The answer is C. And hopefully you answered that on your ed puzzle. You paused it. You just listened to me go over the example. Which I would encourage you to do going forward is to pause it to answer it to the best of your ability. We can go over it together. Those are the expectations. I don't really care if you miss the ed puzzle questions. I'm going to be able to see how long it takes you to go over it. I just want you to generally practice. This is an actual AP question. So there you go. So what backs the money supply? Previously, money was backed by the gold standard. You don't really need to write this. This is just more for your own edification. So previously, in the early 20th century, I could go into a bank, give them $10,000. The bank would give me some portion of gold worth $10,000. Well, I've got gold now. They've got currency. It was backed by the gold standard. So it had some intrinsic value to it. We are no longer on the gold standard. If you've ever watched The Wizard of Oz, it's an allegory about this fight between people that wanted to stay on the gold standard and those that don't. Kind of that yellow brick road is staying on the gold standard. Not AP, you don't need to know that. But what generally makes money effective? Well, it's generally accepted. People want it. People understand it as an exchange. Money is also scarce. There's a finite amount of it, so it makes it more desirable, right? Maybe money is really scarce because you're an AP Econ teacher. So there's a problem. We talked about this with the stone. Our currency is more portable, which is kind of nice. Can be divided where goats and chickens necessarily couldn't. Purchasing power, if you don't have this, I would include this in your notes. Purchasing power is not necessarily the same as one's nominal income. Now, one's income helps to determine its purchasing power, but a purchasing power is really based off price level changes in inflation. Whether your purchasing power is increased or decreased is a result of the price of the goods. So let's say, for example, and I would pause it, if there is inflation, has your purchasing power increased or decreased? Pause. Get back to it. Well, if price level has increased, what's happened to the price of Snickers bars? Well, Snickers bars are now more expensive. If my salary remains the same, $50,000, can I buy as many Snickers as I could previously before there was inflation? No, in which case inflation has decreased purchasing power. Well, rapid inflation, which we know as hyperinflation, maybe I'll give a signal like that's your signal. We'll do that like for you guys to respond. If there's rapid inflation, we know that as hyperinflation. That's right. Good job back there. This decreases the acceptability and it becomes a problem with hyperinflation. So rapid inflation, hyperinflation decreases acceptability. And we talked about, Venezuela, this was a problem they did. Speaking of purchasing power, well, we talked teaching to the contract. If there's high levels of inflation, does that help or hurt teachers' purchasing power? It diminishes it. It decreases their purchasing power. I'm seeing if I can find myself in this picture. No, I guess I can't. All right. 2 classifications of money. The classifications of money are all determined on how liquid the money is. And liquidity, how liquid it is really how quickly can that asset you own be converted into cash. That is liquidity. How quickly can it be converted to cash? So the different classifications, M1 and M2, M2 is going to be the most easily converted. And then it goes to M2, which is not as easily converted to cash. M3, which is the most difficult to convert to cash. Okay. So things that count towards M1, and I would write this down. I would know the term liquidity. I would write and know what counts towards M1 and M2. So M1 is the highest liquidity. It is the most easily converted to cash. Cash itself, currency that's in circulation, dollar bills, coins, those can be easily converted to cash, right? Well, they already are cash. So yes, that counts. Checking accounts too counts as M1 liquidity. It's classified as that. I can go to any bank, any ATM. They might charge me a little bit of a surcharge, but I can transfer that money from my checking account to cold hard cashish, no problem. Traveler's checks, they're a little outdated. They used to be used in the 90s, 80s, even before, where I could have $100 from US government. I could exchange it for any country's bank and get that country's currency, the value for $100. That is easily exchanged for cash across the world. You don't need to know what traveler's checks are, except for that it is considered M1 money. It is the most liquid. M2, slightly less liquid, more difficult to convert to cash. The thing you got to know here is that M1 money is also counted towards M2 money. So think of it like a pyramid, and you're going from M1 to M2 to M3. M2 is going to include M1. So M1 is just M1. M2, oh my goodness, there's Cora. I think she needs to maybe go out. M2, so is M1, in addition, savings deposits, right? So savings deposits aren't necessarily checking deposits. Saving deposits might be harder to convert to cash. You've got to, previously it's not necessarily the case today, but I could only withdraw maybe from my checking account. So if I wanted to get money from savings to cash on hand, previously I would have had to transfer the savings account to money in my checking account to now I'm withdrawing. Time deposits is a term you might hear. Think of a time deposit as a bond. A bond is just an IOU, a guarantee, a promise that you will get paid back that money and interest on it. So if you want to write what a bond is, and I've got a slide later that talks about a bond is just you providing money to our country, our government, maybe a business. And once that bond matures, so you give $100 to the U.S. so that they can fight World War III. Well, the U.S. government would have given me a certificate or a CD that says the U.S. government owes you $100 in this bond. Cash this $100 certificate. Go to the bank a year from now. We will give you that $100 and some percentage of interest. That's what a bond is. Bonds are the safest investment. They are guaranteed back. So long as the country doesn't fold, they will pay you that back. But you're not going to earn much interest on a bond. Like if you were to buy stock with that money, it could potentially earn more money, but it is more risky where you could also lose some of that money that you bought in stock. Anyway, a bond, hopefully you know it, is considered M2 money. And then money market funds, think of stocks. Even better, money market funds, think of as index funds. So an accumulation of stocks within a given market. That is M2. M3 money is going to be money that is even less liquid, more difficult to convert. I'm talking you own a yacht. That's awesome. You own a yacht too, by the way. Well, that might be really difficult to convert to cash. So that's a problem. not as liquid. You only need to know M1, M2. Big things, know M1 is the most liquid and then it goes down. Know that M1 money counts towards M2 money. Some terms you're going to need to know. Just get a sip. Taking a little pause. We're getting there. The financial sector, I would write these terms down. The financial sector, I'm just going to read it, is a network of institutions that link borrowers and lenders, including banks, mutual funds, pension funds, and other financial intermediaries. So, in general, the financial sector are just the people that are related to banks and the people that utilize these services for money. An asset is a tangible or intangible good. Like if I own $100,000 in stock, that's not tangible, but I still own it. So it's intangible. Anything that I own that counts positively towards my wealth, right? So I want assets. That more assets I have, the greater my wealth would be. You purchase a house. Well, that house is an asset for you, right? You get inherited a BMW. You get inherited $100,000. Those are all assets that count favorably towards your wealth. On the flip side of that, liabilities are things that you owe, things that you don't want. So, from the perspective of a bank, right, a liability, and we're going to be primarily talking banks, 4.2, that is something that the bank owes to its consumers. You do not want liabilities that counts negative for you, right? So, let's say you purchase a house. Is that house an asset or is it a liability? Well, that house is a asset. Well, in order to purchase that house, you had to take a $400,000 loan. Well, that loan would be considered a liability for you. Now, let's think from the perspective of a bank. Well, the bank is the one issuing the loan, right? So for the banks, that loan would be considered a asset, right? They own that loan. You have to pay them back. Well, how did the banks get the money to be able to loan that money? Well, because you deposited money into them. That deposit that you did, is that an asset or a liability? Well, for the bank's perspective, that is a liability. They owe you that money that you deposit, right? So it matters what perspective you're looking at. So just as a heads up, a loan is an asset for the lender, the bank, a liability for the borrower. Just as a reminder, if you are taking out a loan, you're a borrower. Does interest, do you want a high or low interest rate? Well, if you are borrowing, you want a low interest rate. Let's think, if you are taking out a loan, does inflation help or hurt you? Think of that Zimbabwe example. Well, if there's high levels of inflation, the money that you pay back you owe is not as much. So inflation helps or hurts borrowers, it helps them. From the bank's perspective, inflation hurts them, right? That's why they need to charge high nominal interest rates. Mr. Clifford can explain this to you probably better than I can, should you want more assistance. For the sake of this class, you don't need to write this down. I think we have it. I'm going to assume that you have it. Maybe I'd write the bottom portion. Personal finance are going to be anything related to stocks, bonds, talking about how much money you have, your retirement plans. It is not the same as investment, though we use them interchangeably within our lexicon. Personal finance is going to be how much stocks do you have? What plan do you have for retirement? That sort of thing. Investments are going to be spending, part of Sig X, right? Investment is spending by who? Businesses. right? Now, in order to encourage investment spending, do they want high or low interest rates? Well, in order for me to take out a loan, it would be more desirable for my interest rate to be low. My shoulders went up. I meant my hands to be up. It would want a low interest rate. The loan would be cheaper. Well, what do you do with that loan? Well, you're going to spend it. Thinking back to ADAS, I'm spiraling the curriculum. If we are in a recession, like there's some fears we might be heading towards, well, we would want interest rates to be low to encourage investment spending, to encourage people to take out loans, thus shifting AD to the right, right? In which case, we're getting closer and closer to full employment. Just as a refresher, investment spending is special. Investment spending causes initially what to shift? AD to shift to the right. If AD shifts to the right, they're spending. What are we assuming that businesses are spending their money on? Well, capital stock. Capital stock, what do I want you to think of capital stock as? Machines. Well, now that they have better machines, they're becoming more productive. That's going to also shift AS. Well, if investment spending shifts both AD and AS, it's also going to shift the LRAS, the long run aggregate supply curve. Anytime the long run aggregate supply curve shifts to the right, that's referred to as economic growth. Our output, our production is greater at full employment. That's what economic growth is. Think of the PPC shifting outward. Changes in sell, changes in technology trade. That shifts our PPC outward. We can now produce more at full employment. There's a video if you want to watch. This is more personal finance. I promise once we're done with AP testing, which whenever that is, we're going to figure out on Friday, we can watch this video and we can talk about setting you guys up in the future so that you guys can be millionaires by the age of 30. Stocks versus bonds. The big difference is a bond is something that is guaranteed. Bonds have interest rates on them. If you are taking out a bond, you want a high interest rate. Why? Because you get more on that. So I would write maybe what a bond is. A bond is just a temporary loan or an IOU that represents debt that the government, businesses, or individuals must repay to the lender, typically with some interest. So the bondholder has no ownership of the company. If I bought a $100 bond from Apple, Apple's going to give me $100 back a year from now once it matures with some form of interest. Now, just a little bit of personal finance. Bonds are the safest investment. And probably if you're looking towards investing in the future, you being young, you can be more risk tolerant. So you probably want a little bit more riskier investments. And as you mature, you're going to want to trade off and exchange some of your riskier investments to more safe mutual funds, bonds, which are far safer. So bonds or IOUs. There's this awesome clip from Dumb and Dumber. Great movie. Doesn't hold up quite as well, but it was one of my favorite movies as a kid where they talked about bonds and IOUs. That's an IOU, sir. That's as good as money. That one's $300,000 for a car. Might want to hold on to that one. A stock. This is going to be related to investment or personal finance. Personal finance. If you purchase a stock, you are purchasing part ownership of a company, right? So if you buy $10,000 worth of Apple stock, well, Apple is giving you part ownership of that company. In exchange, you're giving them $10,000. We'll come at you guys with that. That doesn't count towards GDP initially. Why? Because nothing was produced. You're just transferring ownership. But how well your stock does is dependent on the success of the company. You become a part owner of it. Now, a very, very, very small owner, but an owner of the company nonetheless. So that's kind of neat. Let's write the bottom down. I'm going to try and explain this concept. AP Econ loves to ask, what is the relationship? And remember, Econ is all about relationships. What is the relationship between bond prices, the price of that bond, and interest rates? Now, just remember that bond prices and interest rates are always, always, always inversely related. Okay? Store that in your head. AP Econ loves to ask that, especially on FRQs, to see how many kids, this is very nuanced, very picky, see how bright kids are. I'm going to explain why in just a sec, but write that down. Do, do, do. So, why are bond prices inversely related? I'm going to give an example. I've got this example on the board later. I'll do my best to explain too, but remember, bond prices and interest rates are related inversely. Uh, so let's say there's two bonds, and at the end of the year, each bond price or each bond is going to be worth $110. Okay. So at the end of a year in January 2021, that bond is going to be worth, each bond is going to be worth 110 bucks. Got it? So let's say you buy a bond, or excuse me, at the end of December 2021, you buy a bond January 1st. That bond is, the price is 100 bucks. Okay. It has an interest rate of 10% attached to it. Okay. So at the end of the year, when that bond matures, the bank is going to issue, the country is going to issue how much in return for that bond? Well, they're going to give you 110 bucks. Makes sense, right? That bond matures in a year. It's 100 bucks was the initial price, 10% interest, 110 bucks. Great. Now let's say in June, 6 months into the year, for whatever reason, bond prices increase to 50%. Okay. You've already purchased that initial bond A at 10% interest, right? So you can't exchange it. It's worth 10%, it's locked in. But for whatever reason, bond prices are now 50%, right? Well, would you prefer to have your bond at interest rate A, 10%, or interest rate B, 50%? Well, 50%. You get a greater return on your interest. Well, how do I get both bonds to be equal to $110 at the end of the year? Well, would I necessarily pay $100 for that bond at 50% interest? Is that going to give me 110 bucks at the end of the year? No, right? That bond price is now only going to be $60. A $60 bond at 50% interest, or maybe, 65%. I don't know. I'm just coming up with an example off the top of my head. That $60 bond at 50% interest will be worth $110 at the end of the year, right? So if I wanted to exchange that bond, right, well, I'd have to lower the price of the bond to get the same $110. Does that make sense? How do I get the bonds to be equal? Well, because the interest rates increased. The interest rates went from 10 to 50%. So in order for that bond to still be valued at $110 at the end of the year, the price of that bond is going to have to go down. Make sense? Cool. You can also think of it this way. Well, are people going to want to buy my $100 bond at 10% interest rate? Well, no. Why? Because they can buy a bond at 50% interest rate. So how do I get rid of my 10% interest rate? I'm going to have to lower the price of the bond, right? Time value of money. This is a somewhat complicated example. It's not typically asked on an AP test. Don't tune your brain out. That's not an automatic thing to go, boop. I don't have to worry about it. You're almost done with the PowerPoint, by the way. Mr. Clifford can explain in the future if you want to click on this. But I'm going to do my best. So there's two equations. The present value of money and the future value of money. The The top one is going to be the future value of money. This one right here, X to 1 plus the interest rate toward the times the number of years. And then the future value is going to be the bottom. So let's say this. What do you need to know? You need to know whether the number is going to be bigger or less than what the current value is going to be. So here's an example. Let's say I wanted to know what is the future value, that is to say, how much is a $100 bill that I deposit in the savings account going to be a year from now? That is going to be, what is the future value of $100 that I deposit today? Well, my current value of the $100 today is $100. Given there's 10% interest, well, at the end of the year, my future value is going to be less or greater than $100. Well, it's going to be greater, right? So if we're talking the future value of money, the future value of money is going to be greater. What is the present value of $100 in 1 year? If the interest rate, well, that present value of $100, 1 year from now is $110. If the interest rate is 10, the future value of $100 is $110. Does that make sense? So the future value of money given interest rate is going to be larger. You don't need to memorize this equation. Just note that future value of money is going to be larger. So here is the present value of money. This is the other side of this. And actually, if I go back, what is the future value? This should say future value. Hopefully that makes more sense. Can you see me? Am I still recording? There I am. Hello. What is the future value of money? It's going to be greater than what you currently deposit in the bank. Why? Because it's earning interest rate. Well, what is the present value of money? So this would be, let's say I wanted to buy a $50,000 Tesla 10 years from now, when I turn 40. How much should I put in the bank today? Right? What's the present value of $50,000 10 years from now? Well, is it going to be greater or less than the $50,000 that I want? Well, the present value would be less, in that it's going to accrue some level of interest, which allows me to get $50,000 in the future. And here's the equation for that should you ever want to, go over that in the future. Could be handy for you. All right. That concludes this PowerPoint. I'd like you to make sure you finish the ed puzzle, to take a photo of your notes, submit it to me. And then the third thing is work on the Albert, answer the questions. That'll all be due Saturday. You do not need to complete them all at once. I'm just going to be checking Saturday morning at 10 a.m. to make sure it's completed. If you have any questions, please fill out the Google form sheets. I'll answer them to you directly. We can meet during office hours, right? 12 to 12:30. We can go over them in the classroom cafes, any assistance you need. This week, I'm also offering in the classroom cafes the ability to retake Unit 3 for those students that struggle. Cool? All right. That's 4.1. Make sure you complete the assignments. That's Cora and Mr. Brady signing off. I'm hoping it recorded. Adios. Thank you.